More and more people are looking for more natural treatments for illnesses, or perhaps combining natural treatments with conventional medicine. Joining me in the studio today is Dr. Krista Coombs, Doctor of Traditional Chinese Medicine, registered acupuncturist, functional medicine practitioner, and owner of AcuPlus Wellness Clinic, which has been voted the best acupuncture practice in Lethbridge for the last 3 years in a row. So way to go, Dr. Krista. Good to have you with us here today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you bet. I mean, today we're going to talk about a couple of interesting, challenging illnesses, hypothyroidism and also Hashimoto's disease. I don't know a lot about either, but can you tell us first of all about hypothyroidism?
Okay, so hypothyroidism is when your thyroid gland here in this area of your body starts to slow down, doesn't pump out enough hormone to satisfy body needs for metabolism, growth, fertility, hormone development, and so on, temperature control.
Okay. And now you say that the main cause for hypothyroidism is autoimmunity.
Yeah.
And apparently this ties in as well with Hashimoto's. But now before we get into the actual autoimmune causes here, apparently there are some other causes for hypothyroidism as well. You want to touch those first?
Yeah, for sure. You can have issues with the pituitary gland in the brain. So if there's a tumor there, that can cause problems with communication to the thyroid.
So one gland affects the other gland?
Absolutely. All your glands affect all glands.
Okay.
Everything is interwoven. Everything works together. So the thyroid gland is not on its own. It's not solo. So yes, pituitary gland asks the thyroid gland to produce TSH, which is thyroid stimulating hormone, and that hormone then tells the thyroid to pump out more T4, which is a hormone. Okay. It's a storage hormone. It's not useful really on its own, and then that T4 throughout the body then goes to the liver, muscles, and gut, and that's where most of it is converted to T3, which is the bioavailable hormone, and that goes inside the cells into the nucleus, tells the DNA to pump out certain proteins to work on metabolism, for hormone development, temperature control, mood, etc.
Okay.
It's pretty powerful.
Well, what are some of the symptoms of hypothyroidism?
Oh, there's stubborn weight gain when it's progressing. So stubborn weight gain, mood issues like depression in particular, anxiety, chronic pain can be a symptom, hair loss, very dry skin, but a lot of mental and emotional changes.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Stunted growth, infertility.
All right. Now, again, it's tied in, you say, with hypothyroidism as well, and an autoimmune cause. So define, I guess, what would an autoimmune cause be? Okay.
But so the pituitary, I didn't finish that one, but the pituitary gland is one of the ways that you can have hypothyroidism. Trauma, so hit to the throat.
Oh, you're kidding?
Yeah, can trigger it.
Wow.
Yeah, low iodine. So if you live in an area in the world where there's chronically low iodine available, like might not be in the soil.
So it's actually territorial?
Geographical, for sure.
Really?
You betcha. And if you have too much iodine, you can cause the opposite. You can cause hyperthyroidism. And so that's why we have to be very careful with supplementing with iodine. Even with hypothyroidism, you got to be very careful.
Okay.
Because you can throw them into a hyper state, which is pretty dangerous.
Okay.
But yeah, so for Hashimoto's, the estimate is currently at 95%. At least 95% of all hypothyroidism is caused by autoimmune attack against the thyroid. So the immune system, there's reasons why, but it starts to attack the thyroid gland and destroy it progressively over time. And so a lot of people are not diagnosed with hypothyroidism. They feel like, oh my gosh, I got all this weight gain, or I feel really off, I'm depressed, but I have no reasons to be, or my hair's falling out a bit, but the docs look at their TSH usually, and maybe TSH or T4 hormones, and they're normal still within the ranges set by the lab. And meanwhile, the immune response is attacking the thyroid, and until it gets to a tipping point where the thyroid can no longer support enough hormone production for the body's needs, they won't be able to find it on blood work unless they look for antibodies, like immune antibodies, that are attacking certain aspects of the thyroid.
So the normal conventional medicine approach to this would do some blood tests,
Yep.
and sometimes they might be able to find it, but you're saying it kind of hides there.
Well, they can
sense,
find
right?
it any time, but they don't usually test for it. So what happens is, this happened to me. I went in, you know, I was starting to have this stubborn weight gain. I was really struggling with emotions and just lots of things in life. And my thyroid hormones looked fine. And until I started digging and forcing somebody to test me for the autoimmune markers, I didn't know. And that could be up to 10 years prior. You could be having attacks against your thyroid.
Now, we should let our viewers know. So you actually personally have struggled with Hashimotos,
Absolutely,
right?
yeah.
And wow, okay, so you know now exactly what to look for.
I sure do.
From personal experience, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and again, you say this is typically caused by autoimmune. This is the body's attacking itself, autoimmune, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
But I mean, what are the root causes, though? I mean, is it? I know you'd mentioned a three-legged stool theory,
Yep.
right? And I forget exactly what it was. I think part of it was the environment and maybe genetics as well, right?
So
Can you explain that to us?
Yeah, you bet. Dr. Alessio Fasano, brilliant researcher, did a lot of research in the last number of years on celiac disease in particular, but we're looking at it in terms of all the autoimmune diseases, which is like well over 100 different autoimmune diseases. And so he came up with the three-legged stool theory. And you can add to it a little bit, but the fundamentals are, if you have a stool and it only has one leg, it'll never stay up, right?
Right.
So if you have the genetics, you can have genetic predisposition. It's not necessarily genes for a particular autoimmune disease, but you can have a mix that in relation, when they're all turned on, can lead to this type of thing. So
Right,
it could
okay.
it could affect the immune system or
Leaves you vulnerable. Your
methylation,
genes leave you vulnerable to it.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So then you have the environmental triggers. So you've got, you know, the genetics like a gun, and then the environmental trigger is pulling the trigger on
So
the
what
gun.
kind of environmental kind of things
So
could
the
cause
environmental trigger could be surgeries, medications, toxins in the environment, which we're bombarded
Okay.
by, like in plastics, cosmetics, nail polishes, you know, sprays on your food. It's pretty intense. So some people are more genetically susceptible than other people. Even anesthetic from surgeries and the trauma from surgeries. Physical trauma, so accidents can do it. Even TBIs, traumatic brain injuries, can trigger autoimmune response. Molds, parasite or bacterial or viral infections, especially in the gut. But even the virus Epstein-Barr, which is the monovirus, or some of the herpes viruses, they lay latent. Epstein-Barr in particular can lay latent in the thyroid, it is thought, and can be one of the things that trigger the immune system to go and, you know, attack the virus, and in the end, the thyroid gets attacked, and then the immune system starts attacking aspects of the thyroid. And
All right. Now, are there any kind of cures, treatments that, with conventional medicine for Hashimoto's and hypothyroidism?
Well, yeah, and that brings us to the third leg of the stool,
okay.
right?
Did we miss
so,
one? Okay.
Yeah, we did. So the environmental, so the stool will stay up a little bit, if it'll wobble, so
Yeah.
that can be going on for 20 years. But then as you age and as you maybe abuse yourself with food and so on and have more infections and things and take more antibiotics and whatnot, as you get more hyperpermeable gut lining, that's the third leg of the stool. And once that's happening and consistently happening, you have the stool standing up. That's autoimmune is on, it's blaring, it's roaring, it's causing progressive damage. So what we try to do in terms of healing tools or managing tools is I teach people all the time how to start healing the gut lining, how to manage some of the toxin environmental triggers to reduce the load so your body can handle more of what it's around on a regular basis. But food triggers, you know, 75–80% of the immune system lines mouth to bum. That's incredible. That means that everything you take in, food and drink, is potentially going to be a trigger to the immune system. So if it's already turned on and having some trouble, it's easy to have reactions to undigested food or poor quality food or lots of the toxins and microbes that are associated with that. And then everything gets really disrupted. I kind of liken it to your gut is like a big rainforest. It starts out pretty awesome, but if you start clear cutting because you're not taking care of it, and you got patches clear cut, even when you start to rehabilitate it, if you're doing a good job, it's still never going to be like it used to be. But it'll still be better than it was, and so you can slow the progression of an autoimmune response right away, just with food. Things that I try to empower patients every day to do the things that are in their control, that they don't need a prescription for, they don't need even supplements for usually, or any therapy. Things that they can do every day, like improving quality of sleep, taking their stress down a notch, shifting perspectives, food food therapy is absolutely
So would
essential.
that be the number one kind of?
Well, sleep's pretty up there.
Sleep?
Yeah, sleep, because that's when you regenerate, and the gut really,
Interesting.
really heals a lot in the nighttime while you're sleeping.
So sleep.
Sleep.
Just the sleep itself. It sounds so simple.
I know, but
does.
it isn't. And
You
same
know,
with gut healing. It sounds so simple, but it isn't.
but
easy
literally, if you are not sleeping well,
Yeah.
that's going to hinder your recovery big time.
From anything. So that
Okay.
puts you at risk for heart disease, obesity, all kinds of autoimmune diseases.
You know, I
et cetera.
had it right when I was a teenager. Mom, I'm
slept
sorry
in.
you missed it. Sleeping in was good for me.
Well, you're growing a lot back then. That's when your thyroid's really useful. Hey.
Okay. Now, again, you had Hashimoto's yourself. So were you able to, I mean, I don't know, is there a cure for Hashimoto's at all? Or is this kind of something you kind of have to live with and you can make it much easier to live with? Is that kind of where it's at?
So you learn to manage
Okay,
and,
so
and
you
slow the
manage it.
progression. Yeah.
Okay. So,
There's no cure for any autoimmune disease.
Oh, okay.
MS, lupus.
okay, anything
none of
that's
them.
autoimmune, basically there's no cure.
Nobody knows yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah, how long did it take you to figure out? I guess, I mean, what kind of timeline are we taking? So if somebody came in to see you, for example, and I know what that would probably vary depending on the severity of,
And the age, et cetera.
right, okay, so a number of factors. Is there a range, I guess, of time that somebody would be looking at as far as, getting things under control and living a decent life again? Because if this is really serious, right? I mean, man, your life probably...
It is pretty serious.
Yeah.
I mean, what happens is the docs will give you medication.
Okay.
They'll give you hormone and say,
Okay.
oh, well, now your numbers are in range.
Gotcha.
You should be feeling better. But often we don't feel much better because the autoimmune attack is still happening. So once it's happening against the thyroid, it's probably happening other places. The likelihood of getting another autoimmune disease is extremely high if you're not managing it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so it's progressive.
Oh, that would be not a good thing. Okay.
It really isn't fun, but once you understand what's going on, more of what's going on, and you start making some changes. I've seen people change, I mean, even in myself, within the first week, they changed their diet.
come on,
within
really, that
I
quickly?
swear to you.
Wow.
When I got my numbers back a number of years ago, I was 43, so it was almost 4 years ago. When I got my numbers back, my antibodies for some of the antibodies were over 1,200, which is pretty high. I've seen them higher, but that's pretty high. And within 6 weeks of testing, they went down to 44. And you want to be under 34
Wow.
to be in a remission state.
Yeah, that's
So that was
pretty
just one
simple.
of the antibodies, but still, that was really quick. Within the first week, though, the reason I had gone to get testing at all was because it wasn't really the weight gain. It was more I couldn't put a sentence together anymore. It was, and I live in my brain. I love to study and use my brain.
Wow, okay.
And so I said, this can't happen.
Yeah.
And within the first week of changing my diet, I was fine.
That is very
I was like a
interesting.
different person, like the light switch just
What
went.
what kind of foods would you say? I mean, again, I know it's going to be, somewhat specific to each individual, but
Correct.
generally speaking, are there certain foods that you should avoid if you're dealing with hypothyroidism or Hashimoto's?
So there's a lot of research coming out in the last probably 5 years for sure that's really supporting the foods I'm going to tell you about to remove because of a lot of different reasons. I mean, there's a huge discussion, but the gluten molecule is particularly difficult.
Okay.
So gluten as a protein is very challenging for the body to digest. All the lectins are.
So
but
grains,
gluten-
things like that, that's a no-no?
Yeah, generally.
Okay.
Certainly the glutinous ones. Not all grain have gluten, and not all pseudograins
Okay,
have gluten.
okay.
But they're very similar in structure. So if you have an immune response to one aspect of it, it's cross-reactive.
best
They're
to
all
stay
going
away
to
from it.
trigger.
Okay.
But what happens is gluten is known to cause the gut junctions, the cell junctions, to become leaky. Keeps them open longer,
okay.
so then things can get through that shouldn't be, like toxins. If you don't,
Oh, okay.
have you had a lot of sprayed food and stuff, and bacteria, pieces of bacteria can go through,
Right.
and then that triggers the immune response. So, and that happens in anybody, whether you have autoimmune or not. But it's more, it's probably a
it'll
genetic
be more
thing.
evident.
It's more
and then,
evident.
it
It
makes you more
lasts
susceptible.
longer. So that one
Okay.
and casein in dairy. So
In dairy.
The main protein in dairy.
Very interesting.
Yeah,
Okay.
those are the top two.
Wow, that's very interesting. Okay. Running out of time here. I know you mentioned sleep was a big thing, avoiding stress as well. What would your advice be briefly here to viewers who might suspect that they have hypothyroidism or Hashimoto's?
Or they have hypothyroidism.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would say have more comprehensive testing. So go beyond TSH, T4, T3.
Right.
I would have TPO antibodies and TG, which is thyroglobulin antibodies, tested, both tested. And sometimes I'll see somebody has really low TPO antibodies, it's thyroid peroxidase, but their TG antibodies are through the roof. So it's still Hashimoto's. Anybody who's suffered miscarriages and does have some of these symptoms I've talked about, you have that evaluated because you'll continue very likely to have miscarriages. And so I help a lot of ladies who have that, and they come see me and we find out, I get their doctor to do some comprehensive testing, or I can send them to the hospital for some testing.
Okay. And
then we help reverse that or manage it, get their antibodies down so that they lose weight, they just feel great. I have so many stories.
Yeah.
And then we can try and
then
let them have babies.
Yeah,
they're more secure, then they can have babies.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Krista. Much appreciated.
Yes, well, thank you for having me. I hope it helps other people who have hypothyroidism learn that it's Hashimoto's, because almost always it is.
Well, that's what we want to do. We want to help people. So.
And then there's something they can do. Yeah.
All right. Dr. Krista Coombs, our guest here today. Again, acupuncturist and traditional Chinese medicine specialist, or doctor of traditional Chinese medicine. And you can see her at AcuPlus Wellness Clinic, acupluswellness.com.